Welcome to the Kaiju Network Podcast, episode 126, where we have a very healthy obsession with kaiju. I am your co-host, Kent, and with me is your other co-host,
Jason. How's it going, peeps?
So I am dressed appropriately for this particular podcast, and for those of you who may not be aware of sort of the main topic of discussion this particular episode, just look at my shirt. And for those of you listening to the audio version, unfortunately you can't see it, so I will just say I am wearing a Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla II t-shirt. And I think for the first time ever, and again, if you're listening to the audio version, you're not going to see it, I am wearing official Kaiju Network gear, the hat, the logo on the side, a 1990s hip-hop artist. There's the sort of the third DKN logo, and then on the back, we got a Destroy All Monsters looking type logo with our name on it. It's official. It's all stitched, high-quality stuff. Very expensive to make, but
I was just thinking here recently. I know in the past that we've done some contests and everything, and I was thinking about coming up with another contest with maybe some of our gear, like a t-shirt, and then maybe like a little promotional type of trinkets. I can probably show you some of the stuff later on whenever, if we like after we get done with the podcast episode here, and maybe add in like other things from G Fest this year, like we've done in the past and everything. But yeah, probably not make hats from the place that we that you ordered it from, but probably from a cheaper place or something like that.
I don't know how you can get them cheaper. It actually wasn't bad. The only thing that made them initially expensive was that it cost $5 to make a design on either side, but it cost an extra, I forget, what was it, $10 or $25?
I think you told me it was $25 for
$25 because they had to create special, not really stencils, but for lack of a better word, stencils, so that they could appropriately make them on the hats. But because I ordered, I almost said two, I'm sorry, again, if you are listening to the audio version, you couldn't see that I was actually initially about ready to hold up 3 fingers instead of 2. Because I made 2 hats, the second hat actually was cheaper because these hats by themselves were like, I think, $25. The second hat actually cost $50 to make, whereas the first one cost like $100 or something like that to make, because like I said, the stenciling part is sort of the most expensive part of each hat, because of course they don't have our designs. So because they have to make some special stencils that cost a little bit more. So if that makes sense. I'm not even going to go into it because I'm just going to get confused here. First of all, too, I want to say I apologize that we didn't get the YouTube link up, so we probably aren't going to have anybody watching us live for this show. We've been really bad about getting on top of it. I, on Wednesday, told myself when I woke up in the morning, as I was feeding my cats, I said, okay, got to remember, like, sometime today, got to get a post up saying, okay, we got a podcast, just to let everyone know, hey, just to give everybody a heads up. I totally forgot to do that. And then Friday, I'm like, oh shit, like I didn't do that. I got to do it now. And then I had to create a YouTube event page for this, and I created it, and because I screwed up the last time, I told Jason, I said, I want you to double check this before I post it. And he goes, yeah, I'll post it and check it when I get home. That didn't happen. Well, he checked it, but he didn't post it. And then I didn't double check to see if he posted it. So here we are. Nobody probably to talk to today, but that happens, and that's our fault. So one of the things I wanted to get into, did I just pick up my drink and not actually take a drink?
Yeah. And then another thing that I always keep forgetting to do recently, I've been doing good at getting the podcast audio versions up on the site, and then they'll be distributed out through iTunes and Google Play Music. So if you haven't subscribed to those, make sure to do that, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel down below. And but the past few weeks, I've gotten down with the seasonal allergies that I usually get once or twice a year last month. And then this last week, I came down with a upper respiratory type of infection. And that also sort of screwed my schedule and everything. And then last night, I finally gotten around to making the audio version of our commentary, and I just recently put it up. I would say just about close to a half hour ago on the website there. So yeah, I need to like you. I need to get around to try to get back to the regular schedule of things and getting things up pretty damn early. And I also talked with you that I think we should, after this episode or tomorrow, that we should schedule a like a YouTube live event like 2 weeks ahead of time or something like that, so that we wouldn't have to worry about it right up until when we do our next episode / commentary.
I know. It's just, yeah, we're just bad about that. So one of the things I wanted to dive in first, I wanted to talk about this 5-minute Godzilla IMAX trailer. I saw it on YouTube a day or so after it came out. Jason unfortunately never saw it, so he really can't comment on it.
Yep.
And I tried looking for it on YouTube, and for some odd reason, at least from what we could find, YouTube doesn't have it posted. I don't even remember which page or group on Facebook had the video that I saw it. So I'm going to be the only one that's able to comment on that footage. So my personal opinion from what I saw from that trailer, I mean, I guess there's not a whole lot to say other than I really loved what I saw. This movie is going to be, at least just from what I've been seeing from trailers and even this 5-minute footage, this is going to be a pretty action-packed film. For those who thought the 2014 film was a slog, first of all, I think you're missing the point of kind of the pace and the structure of that film, unfortunately. But at the same time, I think if you did not like the fact that Godzilla showed up late and all that, I think this movie will end up being the opposite of that. So I think for those of you who didn't care for that, you'll be satisfied this time. King Ghidorah, I have to say this right off the bat, and I know some people are going to be maybe a little upset about it, but this is my opinion. You're free to disagree with it. I think finally, for the first time ever, with the exception of the Kaiser Ghidorah, which, yeah, is a Ghidorah, but not a King Ghidorah per se. I know I'm splitting hairs here. But really, for the first time ever, in terms of a King Ghidorah in the Godzilla universe, and again, I'm not even referring to the Mothra trilogy films either, we finally get a kick-ass King Ghidorah. So this is the kind of King Ghidorah I'm willing to say, yes, this is supposed to be what Godzilla's arch nemesis is supposed to look like. Badass, powerful, and all that. And it looks like we're finally getting that here with the King Ghidorah. So I'm really excited about this version of Ghidorah. This has been a long time coming, I think, for the Godzilla franchise. Like I said, yes, Kaiser Ghidorah was powerful and all that, but like I said, I'm splitting hairs. I don't consider that a King Ghidorah. So
just want to throw a little question at you, since I haven't seen this trailer yet, but I'm probably planning on seeing Shazam. So if I do, I would have to go see the IMAX version. Do they show any new footage that we have not seen right up until this new one came out?
Yes, it is new footage. Um, Basically, I'm just gonna say right now and spoil it for people. So if you don't, if you're trying to keep clean, well, first of all, I'm assuming you're skipping ahead anyways. But if you haven't, here's your chance to skip ahead a bit. Basically, what we get in the 5 minute trailer is sort of King Ghidorah's breakout.
Okay.
And I forget the actor's name, but he's the football coach in Friday Night Lights. I forget the actor's name, but yeah, King Ghidorah is breaking out under the ice, and people are collapsing. As the ice is being destroyed and all that. It's a very visually impressive scene, very entertaining. But yeah, and we see King Ghidorah uh, kind of break out here. So um,
Do
it's really fun footage, quite frankly.
do you hear well, does King Ghidorah like use his howl, and if so, does it sound familiar to the
I don't
others?
remember because this was what 7 to 8 days ago when I saw this. Um, so I don't remember. I'm thinking if we do, it's not like the full howl or cry. I think it's maybe like a small growl or something like that. Perhaps don't quote me on that because, like I said, it's been like a week or so since I saw it. So yeah, I think if there is, it's not like the full fledged howl or cry, whatever you want to call it.
Okay.
So and then too, and I don't remember all the trailers. I think maybe one of the newest trailers said this from Sarazawa that there are 17 kaiju. And of course, we'll find out as we see the movie whether or not I'm sure we get at least glimpses of all of them. But because of the fact Godzilla, Ghidorah, Rodan, and Mothra are the main stars here, they're obviously probably going to get the most screen time, and we'll probably get quick glimpses. But again, I really don't know. I don't have answers to that question. We won't really know until we go see the film. So just leave it at that. I just have to say, though, the 5 minute footage is really impressive. It's exciting, and it's something that has followed along with all the trailers we've seen up to this point, which is that it's looking to be a very action packed film. And again, like I said, for those who thought the 2014 film was a little bit of a slog, I think this will be the exact opposite of that. So it's looking to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, and recently I've been watching at least a few videos the past few days saying what's going to come of the whole MonsterVerse thing once Godzilla vs Kong wraps up in 2020, and some of them, not, and one of the head guys at um, Legendary, or is somewhat of a producer or something like that, saying that they're only focusing on the current ones right now, like one at a time. But just from the sounds of it, that it could at least be somewhat promising that they could at least keep going with the MonsterVerse, like maybe have Toho extend like the contract or licenses and things like that. But like they were just kind of somewhat giving their own thoughts of what might come about if that ever happens, or some sort. But uh, at least we know that Toho has planned like a World of Godzilla cinematic universe. Like one of their head guys, like in a interview or something like that, last year or in 2017, that they were thinking about doing their own cinematic universe with all their monsters, with their own movies and stuff. But it was kind of interesting to see some of these videos the last few days sprout up of what would come of this legendary monster verse after Godzilla vs Kong.
Yeah, I think a lot's going to be dependent on various things. One, of course, is going to be money. How profitable are these final two films in this trilogy going to be? That's going to be one of the big driving factors. A second one is, like you were talking about, Toho contracts. Because Toho, I don't think they've been saying they don't really want to be competing with
Right.
these Hollywood films. Um, and because they don't want to saturate it, and they themselves know that Hollywood's going to be making something more snazzier than they are, and they don't want to be losing money off of their own produced Godzilla films. Um, so there's that, and just kind of what plans does Toho themselves have, and sort of their timetable. If they do have movies in the works or plan to do, when are they looking to produce and release them? And another thing is that part of me is thinking that if we were to get a continuation or something of the sort of the MonsterVerse, my theory is that if we were to get something, it'll be another 3 to 5 year wait before we get a fourth film. I'm not. I'm even going to say right now, even if we were to get more, um, I don't think they're going to be sequels to these first three. I think they could be something totally different, like almost a clean slate, like starting from scratch again. And I'm not saying they're going to have like another solo Godzilla movie or something like that. But I think they'll end up doing something that will be different. Like they still may use the same Godzilla model, perhaps, and maybe tweak it here and there, like they did with this film.
Mhm.
But my guess is that it's not going to be tied in with this. That's just a theory of mine. Um, but who knows? I mean, they may continue to make sequels, but my guess is because you got one movie coming out this year and then you got Kong next year. Um, my guess is that depending upon what Toho wants to do, how profitable these films are, and if everything seems to be okay, even if Toho doesn't have anything in the works for the next 5 years, I still think Hollywood, Warner Brothers Legendary, is still going to wait another 5 years because I don't think they want to saturate because they're going to be like, look, we got one this year and next year. We don't want to be doing it every year to the point to where we see diminishing returns. People are going to get tired of this. We don't want to be doing that. So I think if they do something, it's going to be like another 5 year wait.
Mhm. Yep.
So, you were going to say something?
Um. Nope.
Okay. So let's move on to dabbling a little bit into the Ultraman anime. How many episodes have you seen so far?
I've seen all of them.
Which is what, 6 or 8
I think it was
or
12,
12?
12,
I've
12 or
only seen
13.
two. I've
Okay.
only seen two.
Yeah, I watched at least one this past Saturday, and then watched the rest of them this past Sunday here. And I would have to say it follows a lot of the manga from what I've seen. I've only read up to chapter 21 when uh, several years ago, before it officially came over here, reading it on the internet and stuff. They only went up to chapter 21 at the time, and they haven't really updated it since. But I've at least got one volume of the manga itself. I haven't bothered to getting more of them. I've been wanting to, but I always keep forgetting. I think I might have one or two volumes of the Ultraman manga, and from what I've seen so far, it's really good. It basically it for those of you that might have seen this or haven't seen it, the summary of it is that it takes place after the original events of the original Ultraman, but then skips about 10 or so years after. That's when the main story picks up and begins.
Yeah, I keep forgetting this is based off the manga. I haven't read the manga. Um, like I said, I've only seen 2 episodes, so I haven't seen the whole thing. Um, let's kind of just dive into our impressions of this. Who wants to go first?
I can probably go first. Um, my initial, I would say, response or reaction after watching the entire first season of Ultraman. It's it's really good and how it picks up from the original events of the original Ultraman. Um, how the one thing though, some my little gripe on this is that it feels like, when you go from 1966, but then it like 10 so years after, it feels like you're quickly in the modern day uh, part of the story, which it's so a little bit confusing there, here and there, but you'll easily get by all of that. The animation is pretty good, although there are some areas where the animation could have been better, um, and I think worked on a little bit more. There's some instances where it felt like that they didn't do a whole lot to polish up the episodes in certain areas. The story is really good. I like how they still have some of, like, at least a couple of the original characters in there, like Hayata, and then that one crazy inventor there. I always forget his name.
Ito?
What's that?
Ito?
Yeah, Ito. Yeah. And then we get, was it Hayata's son? Was it Shijiro?
Shinjiro.
Shinjiro. Yeah. I always butcher the names. But yeah, the story with these characters is pretty good. Um, the universe is pretty good, and also it's pretty interesting in how they're going about with like some of these aliens and the monsters. They're not quite as big as they were from the original events. Like they're just mainly the monsters have shrunken down to almost like the human like size, but I would say a little bit bigger of sorts. And yeah, it's a really good show for what it is. I would say at least take some more time on polishing the animation of the show to make it look much better. Um, the dubbing is pretty good, and let's see, and the story is pretty good. I think there are some changes here and there from what I've seen, but I think it fits for what the show is doing. But yeah, my only little gripe from here, and I hope that they uh, do it, is polish and take more time on the animation portion.
Okay. Like I said, I've only seen 2 episodes of this, and so my opinion isn't necessarily set in stone. Uh, but I will say this: after watching only the first 2 episodes of this new anime, I have to agree with Jason that I think the animation um, could be better. However, I understand why the animation probably is what it is. It's computer because um, animators in Japan are very overworked, and some have died because they're stressed out and working all the time. So computer technology obviously is quicker and easier to use after you build the initial models. So that way they can get this stuff out quicker. So the animation is passable. It's okay. Um, I have to say though, overall, yeah, I find that the story number one is sort of a continuation of the 66,
Yeah,
65, 66
66.
show. I find that interesting um, because I'm a huge fan of that one. And at the same time, again, I don't want to disappoint anybody from what I'm about to say because, again, I've only just seen the first 2 episodes. I don't like what I'm seeing. Um, I'm not joking when I say that about 2 or 3 minutes into the second episode, I kid you not, I fell asleep and I woke up like towards the end of that episode. Um, I don't like what I'm seeing because it reminds me too much of Iron Man. Um, whether or not that's going to change, I don't know because again, I've only seen 2 episodes. Um, but I just don't like that aspect, and I know I'm on this podcast, and I've always told people, like because I'm a huge '98 Godzilla fan, and I'm always like, well, it's something different. They're trying something different, um, and that's fine. I give them an A for effort for doing something different here. My problem though is that it mimics Iron Man too close, and I don't like that. Um, So right now, I'm not a huge fan of this Ultraman anime. Um, the suit and everything looks okay, um, and all that. I just hope, and I will go back and I'll watch the other 10 episodes and just kind of see how this unfolds. Um, but I'm not a fan right now. Because if this is by and large going to be sort of an Iron Man esque Ultraman, I'm not going to buy into it. Again, I will give them an A for effort in doing something a little bit different. Um, but I just am not digging it right now. I didn't think the first 2 episodes pulled me in to the story all that much. One of the goofiest things I saw, and I think it was it an episode? Yeah, I think it was in episode 2 where Hayata pulled a wrestling move on this evil Ultraman where he stood him up vertically, held him there for a moment, and then crashed down onto the ground like what you see wrestlers do.
Mm-hmm.
And I just am like, that's weird. And the fighting reminded me of a cross between a WWE match and Mortal Kombat. And I like Mortal Kombat. I thought the Mortal Kombat esque ness of those fights was actually quite entertaining to watch. But overall, I'm not liking what I'm seeing. So again, I will finish up at some point the other 10 episodes. Hopefully, I will change my mind on that. But like I said, right now, I'm not digging it. So that's what I have to say.
Yeah, it's understandable, and like what you mentioned, it reminds you of Iron Man. I can see a little bit of that, to be honest. Now that you mentioned it, and the suit, it also is kind of reminiscent towards that a little bit. Maybe in the head
It's
a
a
little
little
bit.
too much like Iron Man for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, understandable.
And so, with that, let's dive into 1993's Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, or as it's known here in the States, Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla II. Um, did you want to say anything about the movie before we dive into a plot overview, or do we want to go ahead and just dive right in?
Let's just go ahead and dive right in.
All right, so here's the plot overview of Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2. Japan's Counter G Bureau, aka G Force, salvages Mecha King Ghidorah to construct a new weapon to fight Godzilla called Mechagodzilla. Kazuma Aoki, who works on the Garuda project, the first part of a Counter Godzilla weapons series, is transferred to G Force to work on being a pilot for Mechagodzilla. Excuse me. On a geological trip to Adona Island, it is believed the scientists discovered a pteranodon's egg. Rodan shows up to attack the camp. Godzilla surfaces shortly after, and the two kaiju battle it out. Godzilla ends up defeating Rodan by burying it under boulders and earth. The dried foliage found around the egg was discovered to create a high-pitched sound that caused the egg to glow red and to eventually hatch. The creature that hatches isn't a pteranodon, but a baby Godzillasaurus. Godzilla makes landfall and Mechagodzilla is sent into action. The two exchange blows, and it appears Mechagodzilla eventually gets the upper hand. However, Godzilla is able to send some of Mechagodzilla's energy back and is able to disable the mech, continuing its march towards finding baby Godzilla in Kyoto. When Godzilla arrives in Kyoto, he realizes he can't retrieve baby Godzilla without hurting or killing it, so he heads back to the sea. Baby Godzilla is moved to a sanctuary and repairs begin on Mechagodzilla. Aoki, due to having disobeyed orders by not helping in the piloting of Mechagodzilla during the battle with Godzilla, is transferred back to the Garuda project. Actually, he's a parking attendant, but ends up working on the Garuda project in secret. A new plan called G-Crusher is in the works. Its intent is to disable Godzilla's second brain near the hips to paralyze it. Miki Sagusa is recruited to locate the second brain. It's also determined that baby Godzilla would be used to lure Godzilla to the Ogasawara Islands in order to implement the plan. Children from Miki's School of Telepathy arrive at the sanctuary to sing Baby Godzilla the, quote, song, unquote, the dried foliage, quote, sang, unquote. The song instead irritates baby Godzilla, but off on Adona Island, it awakens and transforms Rodan into Fire Rodan. What's the difference? Fire Rodan can shoot a beam from his mouth. That's it. Rodan begins making its way to Japan. Baby Godzilla is placed in a container to be taken to the Ogasawara Islands, but the container he was placed in is intercepted by Rodan. Rodan begins to try and break open the container. Mechagodzilla is brought into action, and it and Fire Rodan do battle. Eventually, Mechagodzilla blasts a gaping hole in Rodan's chest, leaving the flying reptile to die amongst the rubble of the city. Godzilla shows up, and it starts battling Mechagodzilla, and they go back and forth, exchanging blows. During the battle, Miki Sagusa reluctantly locates the second brain in Godzilla and disables it. Mechagodzilla assaults Godzilla to the point of death. With the last bit of energy, Rodan flies towards the lifeless body of Godzilla and transfers his energy to Godzilla, resurrecting him. With renewed strength and energy, Godzilla fires a more powerful beam at Mechagodzilla. Godzilla then brings the mech into a burning hulk of metal. The container is eventually open, and Godzilla convinces baby Godzilla to go with him back to Adona Island. The two swim off as the movie comes to a close. So before we actually get into the discussion of the movie, I just want to bring up a couple of historical pieces of information. So for those who are not familiar with this film and maybe some of its history, this movie was originally supposed to be the last Heisei Godzilla film due to TriStar releasing their own Godzilla movie in 1994 that was supposed to be directed by Jan de Bont, but of course that fell through for various reasons. And the story of this movie was originally going to be a remake of King Kong versus Godzilla, but Toho couldn't acquire the rights to Kong. So they thought about a Godzilla versus Mechanic-Kong film where G-Force would be inserted into Godzilla like parasites, and they would try to destroy him from within. But again, due to the name and likeness of Kong, Toho couldn't follow through on that idea either. So those ideas were brought in due to sort of being a big anniversary film, and because it was the 20th Godzilla film. Also, Ishiro Honda would end up passing in 1993 in this film. In terms of trying to make it a King Kong versus Godzilla remake, was supposed to, in a roundabout way, honor Honda as well. But like I said, rights to Kong couldn't be purchased. So we ended up with Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla.
Which I think it was a good choice.
I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to a King Kong remake. Of course, now we're getting it next year.
Yeah.
So I guess it doesn't matter now, but it would have been interesting. But yeah, Mechagodzilla is a good choice. Right off the bat, though, I noticed the score and theme to this movie. Without a doubt, this entire score is one of Ifukube's best. Mm-hmm. The score is one pounding theme after another, but it also showcases more of Ifukube's ability to be more versatile in his scores, something that's not been on display that often when he has scored a Godzilla movie.
And I also like the opening to Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2, where basically we're reintroduced once again to the middle head of Mecha King Ghidorah, where they extracted it from the ocean there and brought it into a base. And what they say, reverse engineering all the technology from that head itself and basically turning like all their reverse engineering into what we know as Mechagodzilla, the weapon and everything. And it's basically just somewhat goes right into action and showing us all of that, even through the title card and the credits and everything. I like how this movie opened from the head uh, of Mecha King Ghidorah in the base, and then showing right up to the completion of Mechagodzilla.
Yeah, I mean, we get a quick exposition basically describing what's going on. Typically, I think I don't have as much of an issue with expositions like some movie reviewers do. Some movie reviewers absolutely hate them, others are in the middle of the road about them. I think exposition, if you can't I think there's always a way you could sort of avoid exposition if you're willing to take the time to uh, write the story properly. Like you could have characters in the film kind of through passing comments or what have you talk about what's going on. Um, but at the same time, I think sometimes either for budget reasons, because maybe you can't film some extra scenes or whatever. I think, especially if it's short enough and to the point, I think exposition is fine. Um, and I like it here. I mean, it is short exposition. It basically says, you know, the year is 1992, and they are creating a new Godzilla weapon, Mechagodzilla, from the remains of Mecha King Ghidorah. And that's basically kind of about it as far as what they say. And
Mhm.
then otherwise, the rest of it is just visuals. So I actually would like to play a snippet of the theme here of the movie. We can play technically 30 seconds of it without having to be in trouble. So I
Well,
would like
I
to play a snippet here.
I probably wouldn't want to do it, to be
I'm doing
honest. I would say at least do 10 seconds of it.
it. Okay. Because this is one of my favorite themes. Oh, shoot, I have it muted.
Okay, I think that's good enough.
So that's basically the theme throughout this entire movie here. And I'm going to just say this right now. I do like a lot of Ifukube's music. Um, throughout the entire Godzilla series, and I know I have been a little bit critical in recent episodes when we've talked about him because I've always said he's never really been able to show how versatile he can be. Um, I started thinking about it when I saw this movie, and I kind of wonder if part of the problem could be the writing of some of these films, that they don't give Ifukube enough scenes to potentially dive into different types of music. That could be part of it, and I think, yeah, that could be part of the problem. Um, because the more I think about, like, just quickly running through my head some of the films he's scored, I'm realizing, yeah, like he just maybe hasn't been given enough of an opportunity to appropriately write certain music. However, at the same time, there are a couple films I can even think of off the top of my head where he could have showed more versatility, but chose not to. So
I would say it'd be a little bit of both.
the blame goes to both parties, is what I'm going to say. And I'm not saying, again, I'm not saying Ifukube is a bad composer. Far from it. I'm just saying I wished, at least with these Godzilla films, he would have shown more versatility with his talents because he is good. It's just that majority of the time he chose not to show that versatility. It really wasn't until, though, this film and Destroya, these final two Godzilla movies he would ever score, that he finally showed more versatility. Again, I think part of that is due to the stories of these two films, um, in which he is given material to basically say, okay, this is a part of a story in which a particular character or kaiju is doing this. So this is the kind of music we need for this. Or, this part, like Godzilla's Death and Destroya, you actually want that to be more somber. Um, I have to say, his theme, though, for this film, I think it's his best theme.
I would have to
I think
say
it's
so too, and I
better.
think everyone else would agree with that.
I don't think so. I think most people would say his Godzilla theme is the best, and that's fine. I do like that too. But I like this one better, because, as you just heard, it's really, it gets the blood pumping. And at the same time, especially with the title card when this movie opens, it's so badass because it tells you right off the bat this is going to be an intense film. And it is
Mhm.
kind of an intense film. Of course, they're going for a general audience, so there's not going to be as much brutality in it as there would be if Toho decided, okay, this is going to be for a mature audience. But it's still kind of a brutal film when you compare it with some of the others in the Heisei era, and even some of the films in the Showa series, and really, quite frankly, even in the Millennium era
Mhm.
as well. It's a little bit more brutal in its contents. And I always said that Mechagodzilla, in my mind, is Godzilla's arch nemesis because this is a kaiju or a mech.
And it shows a good example within this film as the reason why he should be more of Godzilla's nemesis.
Well, and even in his debut film, he
Mhm.
showed it too. Um, just the brutality that this machine is able to deliver really just about every time it comes into contact with Godzilla. Um, and that is followed through. It's a very rousing, intense march or theme that is really quite beautiful. I mean, words can't even begin to describe how wonderful just that theme alone is. And Ifukube's score for the remainder of the film is very appropriate. We get a nice sort of female vocal type scene when the children come and visit baby Godzilla in the sanctuary later on. Um, we even get, um, well, and actually, quite frankly, that same piece of music is played at the very end of this film. And then you get some interesting music, like for Garuda, for example. Um, there is just much more versatility to Ifukube's score this time around than what we got even in Godzilla vs. Mothra and Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah, the two films before this. And this, in my opinion, is one, if not his best scores for a Godzilla film. Uh,
Mhm.
it just shows his versatility, and at the same time, too, just the music, really from top to bottom, is magic.
It also gives that serious tone. There's not a whole lot of the cheesy moments. There, at least there's a couple of them here and there, but they're not as in your face compared to some of the others in the past. Heisei Godzilla movies right up to this particular film here.
Yeah, you must know my notes because that was like the second point I have written on here is about the
Dude,
tone of the film. Um,
magic.
I I mean, I agree with you. I think the movie is definitely more of a serious tone this time, despite, yeah, some of the goofiness. But the movie does a good job of separating those moments because it could be a tonal mess if they weren't careful about handling it. But it's not a
Right.
mess. And like you said, they don't go overboard with the cheesiness or the goofiness in this film. Like we talked about with Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah, that movie, when it tried to be funny, went too far. But even then, there were many moments that were unintentionally funny. You were laughing at the film instead of with it. And that was
Hmm.
one of the films, I mean, excuse me, one of the issues I had with that film was that the tone was confusing. It was sort of, it was not, to be succinct about it, it was not handled well. That film, in terms of its tone, just was not written well, um, and not even filmed well either, quite frankly.
Well, and then some of these subplots to that film just felt like a bit unintentional, and the way that they were going about it with certain characters I know that we've discussed about in certain areas. It just made things much more confusing here and there, right up until the very end. It's like, why didn't you say this to begin with instead of just not mentioning about it beforehand?
Yeah, and I don't mean, we'll get right back on topic here in just a second. But yeah, I mean, like I said in our review of that movie here, like a month or so ago, um, that movie, in terms of its tone and really just its story, it's a mess.
Mm,
Um, this one is one of the better written Godzilla films, not just of the Heisei era, but even throughout the entire series. And I this this is head and shoulders above, you know, King Ghidorah, quite frankly. So, but as far as the tone, yeah, definitely more serious, but at the same time, it's not overly serious because again, Toho is like, we want this, we want to attract the kids. We can't be too bloody, we can't be too scary, but at the same time, it's more intense. It's the most intense Godzilla movie since Baialane. Um, because that one definitely was, you could argue, geared more towards an adult audience, and same way with the film before it in The Return of Godzilla. Those two films in tone are definitely darker than this one, but this one is darker than King Ghidorah and Mothra. So,
yeah.
uh, but it has its goofy moments, um, intentionally though, which is the great thing. But at the same time, they're not like the Marvel movies with their comedy in which they try to hammer home a joke multiple times throughout a film. They just get to the joke and that's it. They leave it alone. And that's that. Um,
Yeah.
and kind of with the tone, going along with that, I like how the movie forces me to sympathize with Godzilla more, despite G-Force and Mechagodzilla technically being the heroes here. Part of that is due to the expressiveness of Godzilla when he's searching for baby Godzilla and how we feel for him during the battles. Um, but a small problem, however, is in that minor lack of expression of Godzilla due to the main suit not being able to portray some of those emotions unless they have extreme close-ups where they use the mechanical head. But that's only, I think, a couple times in this film that they do that. um, so they do a good job, they do a better job about that expression, but it could have been better expression if they were able to have the main suit be more expressive in the eyes, because in this film the baby Godzilla suit and the Rodan marionette, those two things, um, are able to move their eyes.
Hmm.
But Godzilla, the main suit, in all these Heisei films, um, except for maybe Return of Godzilla, all the main suits, the eyelids don't blink. They only do that when they do the extreme close-ups, and that's when they have a separate mechanical head. Um, but that's, to me, has been one of the unfortunate drawbacks to the Heisei series, is that they never get the main suit to be more expressive. But here they do a better job than what they've done in the recent films, just because of the brutality of the battles and the fact too that it's also a result of Ifukube's score. Like when Godzilla finally makes it to the building Kyoto, in which baby Godzilla is being held initially, just Godzilla, like he's kind of hitting the building a little bit, but he's not smashing it because he's like, I can't smash this, otherwise I'm gonna kill him. And Ifukube's score during this particular moment is very touching, and you can just kind of tell also with Kenpachiro Satsuma as he's manipulating Godzilla, kind of like you can just kind of see like Godzilla is saying, I want to get in there, but I can't because I could kill him. And then Godzilla just kind of staggers for a moment, kind of frustrated and melancholy. Then he just turns around, heads back, and then you get this quick scene of a newspaper showing Godzilla out to sea. And the score of Ifukube during that moment is melancholy. And everything works well. It's Ifukube's score and Satsuma's sort of just by simple swaying and like of the suit that helps with that sad expression.
Yeah, I think it's just a combination of those two with Satsuma portraying Godzilla and as well as Ifukube's score. I think both of those combined together, I think, expresses the overall feelings of Godzilla in this film. Even when you say that with the suit lacking in full expressions, except for when they do the extreme close-ups of the animatronic head of Godzilla, I think with these two combinations, there I think fully expresses the feelings of Godzilla.
Yeah, and again, like I said, this score is arguably Ifukube's best, at least for a Godzilla film. Um, I think the only other score that might compete with it is Destroya, and I'm not going to make any sort of real conclusions until we get to that film. And I know it's good. It definitely is. I'm just trying to figure out, okay, which one is actually better. So I will just wait until we get to that film. But
by the way, when we are first introduced to one of the main characters of the film, yeah, I'm terrible with names. He's the one that does works on the Garuda. Was it there's this? He was introduced to one of the ladies there, along with one of the scientists' coworkers of his.
Azusa?
Yeah. Do you notice that the lady there will turn out to be one of the main cast members for both Gamera 1 and 3?
Oh, you're talking about a different gal. Okay. Yeah, I have noticed that before. Yeah, I noticed that, gosh, I don't know how many years ago.
I just
want to say like
I just now
6, 7 years
realized it.
ago. Yeah, she's only in here for like 30 seconds. But yeah, I did notice that like odd number of years back. It's kind of funny. He's sort of a nerd because he's a pteranodon enthusiast. And when he initially gets to G-Force, and I forget the character's name, I want to say it's General Hyodo, but I'm not exactly sure. I know it's not General Asshole, is what I call General Asshole, just because it's funny. But he is kind of an asshole actually in this film, but which is great. It shows that he can act really well. But Aoki is well, his superior is saying, he's reading off his resume, pteranodon enthusiast, and Aoki goes, "Yeah, sir. Don't you know what they are? They're small flying dinosaurs." And I'm flapping my hands here like Aoki does in the film. And it's kind of funny. I mean, he's kind of a goofy character. I like this guy. He's actually the son of, was it Taro Takashima? I think is his dad. His dad actually shows up here. Let me double check that actually. His dad shows up in this movie. His dad was, I think, the main guy of King Kong versus Godzilla here. I keep messing
Oh,
up the last name here. Let me double check that here. I knew I should have written it down.
but yeah, I also liked in the scene where they mentioned about them recovering the egg of supposedly was Rodan, but turns out not to be the case. And he's like, "Whoa, this is so cool!" And then in the next scene, he drives up literally to the place where they're keeping the egg, and he just invites himself into that
Yeah.
laboratory room there, and just decides to take pictures of
Well, and
him.
he steals some of the plant material too, and he's like, "Oh yeah, like some of it was stolen. It must have fallen into my pocket." I mean, it's really kind of goofy, but at the same time, it's charming. So the actor's name is Masahiro Takashima, and his father Taro Takashima gets a brief bit in this film. And Masahiro Takashima, his brother, see if I can find his brother's name here. Um, Brother Masanobu Takashima um, played in Godzilla vs. Biollante.
Okay.
Um, and I think his brother actually died. The funny thing is that they both looked very much alike. It's just that Masahiro is slightly, I don't want to say chubbier because that's not appropriate. He's just a little bit bigger in physicality.
Mm.
Um, let's see. Masanobu, years active. I thought he died. Let me, or is it this guy that? No, none of them died. That's good though. That's good. I thought his brother died.
I don't
But
know where
the
you heard about that news.
I don't know. It was a number of years ago. I was just like, it something just kept sticking with me that he that his brother um, died, but it's just like that. Obviously, is
Not
not
the
true.
case.
uh, but he also ends up playing in Godzilla versus Destroya as a
Yep.
different character, though, um, as the main Super X3 pilot.
That's that's why I was thinking when I was watching this film is that could this guy be maybe possibly the same person in a couple movies
For
later or just a different character?
for years, I thought it was the same guy because when in Destroya, when General ASO, or again, as I like to call him, General Asshole, um, is talking about Super X3 the first time in that movie. He goes, it's piloted by one of our best pilots, and then he comes in and then he lifts up his head, and it's Masahiro Takashima, and I thought, okay, yeah, it's the same guy from Mechagodzilla, except now he's on Super X3, but he plays a different character, which is kind of strange because how General Aso talks about it in that movie, it's like because it's the same actor.
Yeah.
I thought, okay, this is a continuation from this film, but apparently it's not. So I don't know. I probably should watch the Japanese version of that film because it might be worded differently. Um, because I've never seen the Japanese version of a majority of these Heisei films. So I don't know if the
I mean, I
dialogue
haven't
will be,
either, so
but yeah. The miniature work here, though, is some of the best, I think, since The Return of Godzilla, and it's amazingly detailed. And in terms of its size, it's more vast.
I
But
think it's much
the
more
other movie.
deep. I think it's much more detailed than the previous film,
I
especially
think so.
the final battle. Whereas in Godzilla versus Mothra, there when they were in Yokohama, there's just a lot of space within there that they could have added more buildings
Hmm.
in the background there, but it was just maybe like a few skyscrapers here and there, maybe a little bit of buildings there as well, and that was completely it. There was really nothing else added
Well, and it's
into that
modeled off
entire
of
scene.
those exact areas, though, too. So it may not necessarily be the fault. But granted, maybe to some extent it is because you're working on a budget. Um, and I'm gonna still echo what I said in our King Ghidorah and Mothra discussion that those ending battle sets are still, in my opinion, pretty impressive. They are still fun to look at, and they are some of the best miniature sets in those respective films. But this movie, I think, is a little bit better with its miniature work because I think we get slightly bigger sets and more of these bigger sets with bigger miniatures. Um,
Well,
like,
not just bigger, but also more. So,
yeah, because the final battle in this film, you get several more larger buildings than you do in the previous two films for the final battle. But on top of that, too, like for example, there are a couple moments when Rodan makes landfall, and there are a couple impressive destruction scenes there. They're pretty quick, but they're still impressive because they still had to build the sets to be destroyed. And I really do like the work here, and I do think it's the best work we've seen since the return of Godzilla, because we get more of those sets, and I like the fact that when the buildings are destroyed, they look more detailed than what they have in the last two movies. Because in the last couple of films, when most of those buildings have been destroyed, they looked more hollow than they have here. So I just really like the miniature work that we get here. I think it's a little bit of a step up from the previous two films, quite frankly.
yeah,
And
I would say,
arguably, actually, from compared to Baialane as well. Baialane had a couple of nice sets, but I still think the work here is maybe just a little bit better.
yeah, and I would say, in between those films and this film, I would say at this point, I would say the Godzilla vs. Mothra set was probably at least um, the least or the worst sort of setting. I'm not sure how to exactly word this, but you kind of know what I'm getting at with this. I would say maybe like
Impressive.
not the most not the most precise or the most realistic. They the settings, the sets for those seemed a little bit too generic. They seem to be a little bit repeated in certain areas, and then, like I mentioned earlier, that the final battle set, it was just lacking with a lot of other set pieces and miniatures.
I will disagree with you. I think Godzilla versus Mothra is better than King Ghidorah. You could say the ending set of King Ghidorah is maybe a little bit more impressive than Mothra. Um, but in Godzilla versus King Ghidorah, you had more Godzilla scenes set in the countryside than you do in Godzilla versus Mothra. Not to mention, as well, you had a pretty impressive water slash underwater battle in the middle of the film with that model boat that was carrying Mothra's egg back to Japan. Um, I think Godzilla vs. Mothra is a little bit of a step up from King Ghidorah.
Oh, we can agree to disagree.
Well, you're wrong.
No, you're wrong.
uh, I can't believe we haven't discussed this yet. What do you think of Mechagodzilla? What do you think of really the kaiju designs here? I mean, Godzilla really hasn't changed much, but what do you think of Mechagodzilla, Rodan, and Baby Godzilla here?
I was just thinking about jumping into this when you were talking a little bit about the whole set pieces. As far as Mechagodzilla, I think it's a much better representation of how like a giant robot would move and all that.
Mhm.
Granted, the original Mechagodzilla, the way how that was the movement for that version of Mechagodzilla worked out pretty damn well for that one. And the way with this version of Mechagodzilla, I think it worked out how uh, the way how this suit was built for it. Um, I really liked the way how it moved when it was facing Fire Rodan, and they're just the robotic way how it like moved very smoothly, like with the way with the head just tracking Rodan and the torso and everything. Um, although it had some, I wouldn't say some, I would say quite a bit of limited movement when there was an actual person uh, put into that suit. Um, so the other than that, the design of this Mechagodzilla, I really like pretty well, and I think a lot of people do too. The design of Rodan, it seemed like they're going with a more of a natural. Um, what was the dinosaur name for this? Again,
Godzillasaurus.
no, not Godzilla. I'm talking about Rodan.
Oh, they called it Radon because that's the Pteranodon.
Yeah, Pteranodon. They're going. It seemed to be going more of a dinosaur esque version of Rodan in here, whereas in the the original Rodan, they didn't really have much of a dinosaur story. Maybe I would say just a little bit of it, um, but it seemed like they're going with a more of a natural dinosaur background with Rodan. I mean, don't get me wrong, I really like the design of this Rodan. It just seemed a little bit too slim and a little bit too dinosaur esque. Whereas the original Rodan didn't quite look like that, and the other iterations of Rodan, the Showa era. And then, of course, with the most recent version of Rodan in the upcoming Godzilla movie, is falling more in line with the Showa era. But yeah, I can understand with the backstory trying to get more of a dinosaur type of a background with all these monsters with the radiation here and there. It's I don't know my initial feeling of making Rodan as a more of a natural dinosaur in the Heisei era. I'm just it's a little bit of a new type of story with Rodan that I'll probably would have to think more on.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as Baby Godzilla, I like how they didn't give it that Minya design with this one, but also they didn't have any not a whole lot of children in this. They do had some, but they were just in there briefly. But they didn't have any children like interacting with Baby Godzilla throughout the entire film.
It's just a quick moment where they sing.
Yeah, which that sort of subplot within this movie I really like, and it didn't introduce any annoying kids within this. It just this movie's focused more on the main plot of the movie, and it just dabbled into the Baby Godzilla and some of the subplots surrounding it at appropriate times, which I think it fit this film really well. But as far as the design of the Baby Godzilla, like I said, at least it wasn't the Minya design. I think it suits the whole Heisei era more, and I think it's a more of a natural look and feel for a Godzilla when it was being born and how it looked and everything.
Yeah, I'll just dive right into Baby Godzilla. I think people are too harsh on Minya. I mean, I'm not his biggest fan, but I think people are too harsh on Minya. But I do love Baby Godzilla. I love the design, and like you said, it seems to be more natural because it is a Godzillasaurus. Um, I love it. I mean, it's sort of cutesy, but at the same time, it's not overly cutesy. Um, the thing that I love most about Baby Godzilla is the actor Ryu Hurricane expressing baby. Baby Godzilla reminds me of one of my cats, Remington, in that he's a very shy, skittish creature, but when he's around the individual that he loves the most, and in Remington's case, it's me, he's very comfortable and loving. And Baby Godzilla is very similar in this movie. He's very shy, very skittish, especially when he's by himself. But when Azusa, the individual who has been imprinted on him as being his mother, when she's around, he's more calm, he's more comfortable. And I love how that's sort of a very natural feel to this kaiju. And that to me is one of the many intricate things that is done so well in this movie to make you feel very emotional in this movie. And I'm not necessarily saying like crying emotional, because when people say when you get emotional, people generally think like you get, you're bawling your eyes out or you are like overreacting. That's not what I'm necessarily saying here, but it makes you connect to this character. It makes you become more engaged and you become more sympathetic to the character. And Baby Godzilla is portrayed very well here by Mr. Hurricane. Kind of weird to say that, but his name. Um, as far as Rodan goes, it's too bad that the marionette is a little stiff. But when
Yeah.
I watched the movie, I thought was stiffer. Um,
But
um,
yeah, that's
it's
that's one thing
actually
I
not
forgot
as
to
bad
mention
as I
about.
thought. It's not as bad as what I thought. In fact, when I think about it, I think the Mothra and Batra marionettes were actually stiffer.
I would say the
Yeah,
Bachelor one is probably the stiffest one
yeah, the
of the
Batra
ones.
one I would say is the worst out of the three. Um, but this one isn't too bad. It's still unfortunately too stiff.
Very
But
limited in movement. There you go.
yes. But again, like I was talking about earlier, one of the great things about this marionette is that the eyes do move. It's not just when they have some of the close-ups with the hand puppet, but it's even the marionette itself. The eyes do blink. So that's one of the things I love about this marionette. As far as the design goes, I really do enjoy it. It, I mean, there's not much you can change, but I do like the fact that he's more slender. He's more athletic. Like he's kind of like a male athlete. He's wider in the shoulders, and then as you come down further the torso, he's slender.
Mhm.
The Showa era Rodan, with the exception of the very first Rodan movie, always seemed more either just straight or kind of even paunchy to some extent. I always thought the design sort of got worse with Rodan as the Showa era progressed. Here, he definitely looks more aerodynamic and athletic. Um, I like the three crest horns. I like the fact too his face is definitely more pteranodon or prehistoric reptile esque. Again, it's the first time I thought he's really looked good since his first film. He's looked okay in other films like Ghidorah and Monster Zero and Destroy All Monsters, but I thought his appearance took a step down with those successive films in the Showa era. Um, Mechagodzilla, I agree with people who say that it's not as sinister looking as the original Mechagodzilla, and I agree with that. The original Mechagodzilla definitely looks very aggressive because of how it's built with the jagged edges and just kind of how it looks like it's got a furrowing brow. This one, though, definitely looks more like a robot. And of course, the Heisei era is trying to be a little bit more quote grounded in reality unquote. So of course it's not going to look more aggressive. But there's something to be said though too about more of the roundedness of this particular Mechagodzilla. I think in terms of movement, it looks better.
Mhm.
That's not to say the original Mechagodzilla didn't. It did. But I like the fact like your knee joints, your elbow joints, your shoulder joints, they're ball and socket, which makes more sense because it's smoother movement and it will allow you better uh, range of motion during combat. And one of the things I love about this particular Mechagodzilla is like if it's turning, the head turns first and then the rest of the body rotates.
Yeah,
Uh, I
as I
like
was mentioning about earlier, yeah.
I like that aspect of this particular Mechagodzilla. It seems more robotic. Um, in its execution. So I mean, by and large, I like the look of all three kaiju in this film. And like I said, Godzilla hasn't changed. There's been small tweaks, but not enough
Mhm.
to really comment on. Godzilla still looks good. He
Yeah.
does, but
But what do you think of the visual effects of the film? To me, I think they really improved uh, on the visual effects on this far better than I would say Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah, far better than that film. And I would say that they improved even more from the previous film as far as visual effects go. There's to me at least there were some instances where you can definitely see some of like the green screen areas where they were
still
cutting out. Yeah, it's not too terrible. And as far as the 3D animation when they were showing uh from like the beginning and then like the Garuda stuff and all that, that's far improved compared to the other Heisei films, particularly far better than Ghidorah. I always go back to that one. But to me, I think the visual effects in this film have improved much better.
yeah. The only other film I think out of the Heisei films from King Ghidorah through Destroya, the only other film that I think could match, if not exceed, the effects of this movie might be Destroya. Again, I haven't seen that film since December, and I'm not going to make any. I remember the effects being good in that one as well. Again, kind of like the score. I'm not going to make any sort of definitive conclusions until we get to that film, and then I'm like, okay, now that I've seen it and it's fresher in my mind, what do I think about it? But yeah, I think definitely the visual effects in this film have been the best since Biolane. That one had more practical effects and computer effects, but when you look at the computer effects, yes, the computer effects here were better than that film. But the miniature work, I think, of Biolane was better than here. So it depends on what you're talking about when it comes to that film. Um, but I think, yeah, I mean, visual effects wise, it still holds up really well. It's you can tell in certain spots that there are composite shots. Did you watch the Blu-ray version of this?
Oh yeah, I have that one in the
I did too. And
double
similar
feature.
to with Return of Godzilla, the problem with some of these older films that were not shot in high def, when you transfer them into high def, some of the seams start to show. I remember seeing the VHS and DVD versions of this film, and same thing with Return of Godzilla. Um, you don't notice some of those shots as easily as you do in the high def mode. But even then, in the high def mode, exclusively for this film, they were not as bad as some other Godzilla films that have been transferred into high def, which is still a testament to the effects work of the time and that they weren't so cheap or shoddy or whatever word you want to use to the point to where when they got transferred into high def, they weren't quite as obvious in those
Yeah,
composite shots.
yeah, it's like uh, when watching the film in Blu-ray, but on a 4K TV. Um, to me, I didn't. I would still say, even with those two formats, that the visual effects were still much better compared to some of the other films that you probably have discussed. But I would also reiterate or mention that one of the things that I might have a gripe about uh, with one of the other effects is that when Godzilla was searching for baby Godzilla and when he was up to that one particular building in Kyoto and he shoots out his atomic ray in that one certain angle seemed to be like it was made in was it Adobe or Adobe Flash, or at the time I probably would say Macromedia Flash, or in Photoshop animation or something like that. It it wasn't the best looking um, atomic ray visual effect. Uh, the way that it was made in that certain angle when Godzilla was shooting it out. If you go back and watch that particular scene of that film, you can probably see my reason to that one. But other than that, um, visual effect, uh, I would say all of them look pretty damn good for what I was watching on a Blu-ray on a 4K TV.
Yeah, I mean, not every special effect, is perfect or anything like that. Even in this film, but at the same time, I will say the effects all around, both practical and digital effects in this movie, still hold up like nearly 26 years later.
Mhm.
I mean, that's a testament. And I remember saying though too when we discussed Godzilla versus Mothra here, some odd weeks ago, that the effects in that movie uh, were definitely pretty good too. Again, like I said, there weren't as many digital effects there or anything because a lot were, uh, definitely a lot were more practical than digital. But I thought they held up relatively well still. Um,
Mhm.
so yeah, and even here, most of the digital effect shots here are mostly the beams. So of course, a lot of times you can get away with them being more brightly colored and maybe more quote unquote cartoony looking. But still, there's still some sort of composite, or for lack of a better term, digital effects or drawn effects when you're talking about films from like the 60s and 70s that don't quite hold up as well over time. A lot of these, including, going back to films like Return of Godzilla, even some of the digital effects in King Ghidorah will still last relatively well. They will still kind of last, uh, the test of time. And here, though, I think most of the effects are half a step to a full step above of what we've seen in the last two films, from top to bottom. And I think they're going to hold up a little bit better
Mhm.
for the most part. But yeah, I think they're pretty good. I mean, some of the practicals definitely, I mean, aren't going to necessarily hold up, but that's just kind of how they did things, and also, a sign of the times, so to speak, as well. But they're still pretty good.
Mhm. Yeah. And then how about the story? I think we might have mentioned about it a little bit as far as the seriousness of
The tone, yeah.
yeah.
I think the story is really good. It's very straightforward. There's more action in this film than most of the other Godzilla movies of the time. Again, this film and Destroy seem to be sort of competing with each other on various levels, including, I think, in terms of the amount of action that you see. Because there are, four or five relatively decent action sequences in this film. You get two fights of Godzilla with Mechagodzilla, You get a Rodan versus Mechagodzilla fight. You get a Godzilla versus Rodan fight. You get Rodan coming in, taking the container. Um, sort of going along with the first Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla fight. You get kind of an extension of that as he's going into Kyoto. Not a ton happens, but there's still explosions and miniatures being destroyed. So I guess you could even go along with that. The movie the movie is like an hour and 45 minutes in length,
Mhm.
but because there's a lot of action and because it's written so well with various degrees of emotions, and that in turn makes it more engaging of a viewing as well. It seems like it's a shorter movie than what it actually is.
Yeah, and also the one thing that I've noticed too, I think that this was one of the I would say the first film in the Heisei um, series where the humans side of the story didn't really have a an antagonist human
That's
uh,
okay.
within the human side of the story, which to me I think makes it better though, because then you can focus more on what's going on with the monsters, but as well as balancing out with the other human characters that are, the main characters of the story as well. So you don't have kind of like this triangle type of story for the Godzilla films. To me, I think you have two balancing things, keeping things in check instead of having another one in there that could potentially unbalance things out.
Yeah, and I mean, not every film has to have some sort of human antagonist. I know we get one, if not a couple, in Space Godzilla, um, but we'll talk about that when we get there. But yeah, the story more or less centers around Baby Godzilla because Baby Godzilla is the reason why Godzilla's showing up. Baby Godzilla is also the reason why Rodan shows up. And Baby Godzilla is also used by G-Force to lure Godzilla so they can bring Mechagodzilla in to destroy it. So,
Mhm.
Baby Godzilla is sort of the MacGuffin of this film. And
I like how you put that.
well, I mean, it's true. That's what it's called. He's the MacGuffin. Uh, he's basically sort of the for lack of a better word, tool used to kind of help move the story forward. Because without him, I mean, you don't have much of a story, and it's pretty
Mhm.
simple and straightforward, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with simplicity,
Yeah.
but it's done so well that you kind of forget how simple it is, really. And again, a lot of that's due to how well it's written with the various degrees of emotion that are brought in. And I just have to say, since this is like the second or third time I've mentioned this during our discussion, I will argue I think out of at least all the Toho produced Godzilla films, I think this film probably has the widest array of emotions running through it than your average Godzilla film, which really tells you again that if you really take the time to construct a story, I'm not saying that this makes it better, but I'm just saying that if you took the time and really thought through a story, you can make these things, I guess, again, for lack of a better term, more deep than your typical, Godzilla fights another giant monster, and basically the only emotions you have are excitement, um, and excitement. I guess really is about it.
Well, also, I think it really helped without having a human antagonist being thrown into the mix, which to me, I think it would have just complicated things a little bit more and maybe have muddled the story a bit more.
It
I just,
depends how it was written.
yeah, but I think the way that it was written for this movie, I think it it would the antagonist wouldn't have a human antagonist wouldn't have fit within this story, which to me I think
the way
made
it's written.
it made it a whole lot better and just balanced things out a little bit more.
Yeah, well, and since we're talking about a potential character, let's just talk about acting. I think the acting, by and large, is good. It's not exceptional because there are
Yeah.
a couple moments I would argue, like Santa Claus technician in this movie, who's basically the head scientist of the Mechagodzilla project. Part of it is the dubbing. Let's just say this: a lot of people, poop on the Heisei series for the bad dubbing, and I'm not necessarily disagreeing, but at the same time, I still don't think the dubbing is as bad as people claim it is. But his dubbing is not that great, but at the same time, his acting doesn't help either. So I would argue he's sort of one of the downer characters as far as acting in this film. But otherwise, everybody else is either good to great in this film, I think. And to be even more specific, Miki Sagusa, I think her role here is one of the best she's had. And
Hmm.
sure, she is probably best utilized in Baialane, but her role here, and again, Destroya, I think is really some of the best that the character has ever been involved with, because when she's recruited to be part of the G Crusher um, campaign, you can just tell the look on her face when she's initially recruited because she didn't want to be a part of it. She's just like, I don't want to be a part of this. And then during the actual battle, in which Godzilla's down and they're ready to fire the Crusher to destroy that second brain, and she puts on the goggles to locate it, she has a moment where she locates it, then she closes her eyes and puts up the goggles and is like, I don't want to do it. And then General Aso gets on the mic and says, "Do it exactly as you're told." Her role here, she has more of a role, whereas in the last movie, she basically was just there, didn't really have anything to do. Quite.
Right.
And King Ghidorah, she had more lines than in Mothra, but even then, she really didn't do
Yeah,
anything.
she didn't. I think she didn't really have much of a role in those two movies
Yeah,
since her debut. But in
she
this
has a
one,
wider
she
role.
had yeah she had much of a better slash bigger role. But then
I
just the
forget a
kind
lot
of
of times she's even in like Mothra and King Ghidorah because
yeah
yeah, she's just there.
yeah, and just to add on to your talking points as far as the acting for Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2, in my opinion, as far as the Heisei series goes, to me, I would say that the acting for this film is probably one of the best. I would say maybe in the top three or the top two um, movies as far as the acting goes. People and the people that have been a part of this film have been exceptional. Of course, there's some quirky people that may not have been the best fit for certain roles here and there, but as far as this movie goes, I would say the acting, the human acting for this one is, to me, one of the top three or two in the Heisei series.
Yeah, I mean, I think the acting in The Return of Godzilla, the Japanese cut, is really good. Um, Baialane is good as well. Destroya, Destroya is good as well. So yeah, I mean, there are four films in this era that I think the acting is like good to great almost from top to bottom. And of course, there are exceptions to that. Like I said, Santa Claus technician in this movie. I like calling him that just because, again, it's funny. I would say he's the one character that shows up not often, but enough to where he's considered sort of a he's a minor character. I just get brain farts anymore when it comes to words. But but anyway, like he's in the movie enough to where his acting ability does, on some level, even if it's a small amount, affect the film. But one of the unintentionally funny moments of this film involves him, where I think it's after the first fight and Mechagodzilla's getting repaired, and he is talking to, I think, one of like the other military guys, and he goes, if we attach this thing over there, then we can attach that thing over there, and then the film cuts.
Are
And
you
I,
talking about that older white professor looking
yeah,
dude?
yeah. And I'm like, you're a scientist. You're supposed to have a PhD. You're supposed to be a genius, and you're using the vaguest of language. That's like me telling you that thing up above you there should be moved behind that thing over there. That thing sitting on that thing over there should be moved to that thing over there. And it's just like,
And then one of the other things too is that he sort of had a bland or a monotone expression on his
right.
character throughout the entire movie, which to me, well, and even the way that he talks too, I'm not. I think he might have talked a little bit in Japanese in some of the areas of
Maybe
the
I'm not
film,
sure.
but then I think in throughout the most of the film where he was in it, he was talking in English there.
Well,
But
and you're talking about his bland expression. Uh,
yeah,
there are two moments in this movie that really express this. The first moment that I can think of, anyways, comes when Aoki is transferred to being in charge of parking, and he's been messing around with Garuda, and he's realizing, oh, like we can use Garuda to attach to Mechagodzilla, make it Super Mechagodzilla. It'll be more powerful. When Santa Claus guy gets in his car and is ready to leave, and Aoki is turning, the parking platform, he doesn't let him out because he needs to talk to the head technician of the Mechagodzilla project to convince him to use Garuda on Mechagodzilla. And the scientist realizes, hey, I missed my outlet here. And he goes, hey, stop this damn thing. Like, he sort of shows a little bit of an expression, but it's not enough to be convincing. And then very shortly after that, when he shows this scientist what the Garuda could do, he goes, we can get by with only minimal changes to attach Garuda to Mechagodzilla. The scientist then looks up at Aoki and he goes, indeed, this would make it possible. And that's it, just, the
yeah,
driest of expressions. And
you could definitely tell that the guy wasn't really much of an actor to begin with.
right. Got custom my keyboard here.
Just by looking at that hat with the word mark there, it sort of looks like a horn.
Well, and speaking of funny moments, I always thought another unintentionally funny moment comes, and this is one that you and I have poked fun of in the past, where in the final battle when Godzilla makes landfall, the head pilot of Mechagodzilla slowly moves his hand to the control stick. And you and I always chuckle at that because we're like, you're inside Mechagodzilla. Godzilla can't see you. It's not like you're trying to be a gunslinger and, trying to make sure the other guy doesn't see your hand grabbing for your gun. It's like you're inside. You could just grab it like that and Godzilla wouldn't know what you were doing.
Yeah.
But yeah, sorry for those who are listening to the audio version because I was making the move. I was just, dead face and slowly reaching my hand towards the imaginary control stick of
I don't know if
Mechagodzilla.
really anyone saw because the camera was focused on me rather than you there. So
Way to go, YouTube. I still even today get a chuckle out of that moment just because, first of all, like, the camera didn't need to be focused on him anyways. Second of all, he didn't need to react so slowly. It's just, this is not some sort of showdown. And
maybe just to add a little bit of character to the film, that could be the case.
yeah. And I'd also argue that Wataru Fukuda, who played Mechagodzilla in this film, And who knows, maybe he wasn't in the suit during some of these scenes, but I would argue he had perhaps one of the most dangerous moments of being in a Godzilla suit, when towards the end of the final battle, all the fire and explosions surround him and even temporarily envelop him. Like
Well,
I
and
said,
even the sparks too.
well, yeah. Well, and I wonder though too, there could have been a couple of moments there where the suit maybe was empty, and it's quite possible. Uh, but I'm just like, looked at that, and for the first time ever, I thought, you know, we're always talking about Nakajima and Satsuma, getting burnt and stuff like that because they have little like firecracker like deals on the suit to simulate explosions, like missiles hitting the suit and all that. But I'm like, these are actual like explosions with major fire
Yeah.
coming out here. I'm like, that's got to be hot. Those are bigger explosions too. They're not just firecrackers. These are like stuff to where if you aren't careful, you probably could blow off your foot. I
Or
mean,
get second or third degree burns.
yeah, and I'm just like, that looks dangerous. I just like for the first time I started actually thinking about the suit actor here in this particular moment of the movie.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, there were some instances where I saw in several scenes where there was no actor in the suit, of course.
Yeah,
Particularly when it comes to throwing Mechagodzilla in the air and then something
that
like
was a
that.
great moment though. I mean, that was just great seeing Godzilla like more or less put him in a headlock and then toss him. That's one of my favorite moments of this film.
Yeah.
Uh, well, and you can tell too, like during the final explosion of Mechagodzilla that decommissions him for the rest of this film, you can tell the suit is empty,
Oh yeah.
which is good considering. I mean, kaboom! I mean, you talk about explosions. That was an explosion.
Oh yeah. So is there anything else that we haven't touched
I
upon?
hit all the points that I wanted to get to. There's a lot we could talk about. I mean, if you can't tell by now, I am a fan of this movie, and I've said it before on many episodes in the past of this podcast. But yeah, I do like this movie. I'll go into final thoughts first because you've been doing it quite a bit lately.
Fine by
So
me.
so here I go. Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla II is without a doubt one of the better produced Toho Godzilla movies. The writing is incredibly solid, the acting is by and large competent, the action is intense, and the wide array of emotions on display make this one of the more engaging Godzilla experiences. The tone is more intense than the two, or even three films that precede it. There is an air that Japan has had enough of Godzilla and they are pulling out all the stops to kill him. The idea of taking out his second brain and continuing to pelt him with beam after beam as he struggles to get up and fight back is intense and a struggle to watch as our beloved Kaiju fights to stay alive. While not a lot of blood is shed, there is no doubt more would have been if Tanaka and Toho were wanting to aim this at a more mature audience. It's still very brutal. Ifukube's score here is one of my favorites of his. I am a fan of March's and he provides plenty here. More importantly, he provides a fair amount of newer material and recycles very little from previous films, something that can't be said of his previous two scores. He's more versatile here as well due to the film's plethora of emotions. It forces Ifukube to get out of his comfort zone, so to speak. The movie runs about 1 hour 45 minutes, and I have to say that the viewer doesn't feel it. Not only is there so much going on, but the writing is so good that we're more invested in this movie than usual. I couldn't believe how the movie flew when I sat down to watch it for this review. There are several fights sprinkled in throughout the movie, which makes it for an exciting viewing experience. This movie is one of my favorites out of the Toho produced Godzilla movies, and I'm always shocked after each viewing why I don't keep it higher on my list of favorite Godzilla films. It's beautifully produced, incredibly entertaining, and one of the best Godzilla movies ever produced. High recommend, which of course means it's a buy.
So for my final thoughts and overall review of Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2, first off, far better than Ghidorah. Just want to point
Yep.
that out.
It
What's that?
doesn't take much.
Oh yeah, doesn't really take much. And I really like uh, they how they've written the story and the direction for this film. It's a much more serious. There's not a whole lot of cheesy goofiness going on, but there's at least a few added in the certain right areas of the film, and I really like how the characters are portrayed in this film, and is really dig the not only the kaiju suits, but the miniatures and the battles as well. There's, I think, um, if I can remember, probably the most amount of battles in this film in the Heisei area as far as the combinations goes, where we see two Godzilla versus Mechagodzillas, and we see Godzilla versus uh, Godzilla versus Rodan, Mechagodzilla versus Rodan, and yeah, it's, to me, I think it's probably the most amount of kaiju battles that I can think of in the Heisei era. Um, the visual effects in this is so much better than I would say in the past couple films. Um, it's it's just a really good film, probably one of the better ones in the Heisei, if not probably one of the best, maybe in the top three, from, I would say, the top two to the top four there. Yeah, it's just a really fun, I would say, action packed movie that's literally just sort of gets straight to the point on what it's trying to do. Very focused. Not a whole lot of interference or things getting in the way. Um, so yeah, Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2 for me, definite buy.
All right. So with that, that means we have an episode the 27th, which means another commentary. And this time it's for you to choose.
Oh boy.
So let me see here. I'm going to do a screen share so you can see what we have.
Make sure you don't have anything inappropriate up.
I closed everything out. Okay, so here we go. Let me know when you want to scroll.
Oh crap. Talk again here.
Hello? People listening to the audio version are like, did they just stop? It's like, no, Jason's watching here. I mean, looking here.
The one that's sort of catching my attention right now is Atragon.
Atragon?
Yeah.
Well, see the whole list before you make your final decision because there are 66 movies we still have left.
But yeah, scroll down here.
Oh, we already did Yangri. Hold on, let me delete that.
Oh man, Daimajin. I actually want to watch Daimajin again. Oh, Garuda. Since we mentioned about Garuda, I keep forgetting that there's another movie called Garuda from Thailand.
Yeah.
Dude, let's do that.
You want to do Garuda?
Yeah.
All right. That'll be an interesting one.
Definitely will be.
All right. So April 27th, 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, probably more likely 1:45 is when we'll start. That's what usually happens. We will do Garuda. And I tell you something, dude, almost a month from that point, King of the Monsters.
Oh yeah.
So we're like a month and a half ish away from some goodies here,
Yeah,
which
so basically after the commentary it'll be the Godzilla for Space Godzilla episode, and then I'm probably guessing we will be doing Godzilla King of the Monsters.
Godzilla King of the Monsters, and then at that point, that's going to be the last podcast we're going to do until you get here in the first part of July, and we end up doing our G Fest preview. And again,
So
as a reminder for people, the reason why we aren't doing any more podcasts after we discuss King of the Monsters is because my folks are going to be here and my dad's going to help me rip out my basement and rebuild that. So it's going to be tough for me as it is just to go to the movies even one night and see the movie and then like a day or two after that to do a podcast to talk about. You and I are probably going to have a later podcast to discuss that movie, like towards the early evenings or something like that, to discuss that film. But I'm
mhm.
going to try my hardest. If I end up having any issues, I will contact you and I will let everybody know on our Facebook page that I'm going to maybe have issues just even going to see the film.
So
I
yeah,
hope I really want to see it and I really want to discuss it too.
so basically we've got at least 2 to 3 more episodes left until we are on a month hiatus until our pre G Fest episode in early July.
Yeah. So we'll end up discussing basically kind of again, for those who are familiar, we just kind of go through what panels are offered. We kind of give everybody a rough idea, more or less what days they happen, and we kind of discuss which panels interest us and which ones we hope to go. And so that's kind of basically what it is. It's more or less just a podcast for those who are going to G Fest to get excited about it. So that's more or less what it's about.
Yeah, and during for the past month or so, I've actually been building a little splash page of the event for our website, which will also house like the live YouTube stuff at the very top, and then as well as some little bit of social media things of what we'll be doing live, like through Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook as well, and then a list of guests, and then a list of possible panels and stuff that I'll probably be adding up as soon as I get up over to your place there.
Yeah. So, and we'll discuss more about G Fest once we get closer to that. But I thought we did pretty well last year in terms of taking some video and snapshots. I don't remember though how much of that stuff we uploaded.
I know. I think I've uploaded quite a few, and I know I want to try to start doing a little bit more of the Instagram stuff, especially with the more recent happenings that have been going on with Facebook here, with a lot of people deciding to quit on it here and there. So I'm thinking about trying to at least expand into some other opportunities. With us starting out with YouTube, it's kind of a good starting point. So at least try to get more into Instagram with them. At least having that IGTV that was released right around the time when we were doing G Fest last year. So try to get more into that stuff.
Yeah, and I would like to do some live YouTube videos as well. Part of it, again, is going to depend on the internet connection. Um, at the hotel. So
Yeah,
some
and
people would be like, "Well, why don't you use your 4G?" And the reason why I won't use my 4G is because my plan is not that large, and to
same
try to
with mine.
do, like a live video and all that, um, that's going to take a lot.
Yeah,
So
and plus with the hotel internet or slash Wi-Fi, it's pretty notorious that it's sort of bad in a way, particularly when there's a lot of people there at the same time that they also use their stuff, so it can be pretty slow and not quite as good as far as quality goes.
well, yeah, it's so weird. It's very inconsistent because um, it's very inconsistent. There sometimes it works, other times it doesn't. In some spots, the hotel it works, other spots it doesn't. A lot of it, though, too, also depends on how many other people are using it, because obviously, the more people you have on something like that,
Yeah,
the slower the speed becomes. So
yeah. Even
yeah,
with the quote unquote complimentary internet that we usually get with the convention deal, you remember that one year? I think it was our second or third year there.
I
We
want to say
were
it was
at
the
like
year.
in the was it the second or the third highest part of the hotel building where we barely got some internet or wireless internet.
Yeah, it's been more passable in recent years, but it still could be better.
Hmm.
Considering it's a four-star hotel and for how much money you dump into spending there each night, it's like, look, you need a your internet should be good enough to where I could stream Netflix without a problem.
Well, and as well as trying to keep maintenance on their elevators. I mean, with the amount of money that they get, this is one of my biggest gripes when it comes to the Crown Plaza Hotel there in Chicago is that it just seems like they never really bother trying to keep up with the elevator maintenance or just flat out just get some new elevators.
Well, I mean, I don't know exactly the situation. My guess, though, is that again, especially with something like G Fest where the hotel is booked completely, you get enough people, you can fit what, probably two or three times worth of people and items on a single elevator. And you're doing that, and you got a hotel that's what, 14 floors. It's always moving, always carrying pretty much to capacity once the convention definitely starts in every car. Um, I'm sure, all that and the moving up and down, like the only rest it gets is probably late at night,
Yeah.
when everybody's sleeping. Um, I can see that definitely putting a lot of stress and wear and tear on an elevator, just even in a short period of time.
Yeah. And it's just
I'm just glad they
basically,
have stairs we can use.
yeah. But it's like every year when we're at the convention, there's always maintenance to be had on at least one elevator there. I
That
think this last G Fest, I think they had two elevators in maintenance there, which made things
well,
much more
they've been
complicated.
a little bit better because yeah, there was one or two this last G Fest that were out of commission, but they got on those relatively quickly. I think there've only been two G Fests where we've been there where one or two elevators were out that they never really got fixed in a timely manner. Otherwise, they've always been good about it.
Yeah. But at least the recent events, G Fest events that we've been to, at least we've been relatively close to the main floor where we can just use the steps
Well, and some
there.
people are probably wondering, well, when you had those years where you were like on the 12th floor or whatever, we were like, did you guys use the stairs? And my answer to that is, yes, we did. Of course, it's harder to go up than it is to go down. But I tell you, though, going down, you get dizzy after a while. Going up, you get a little dizzy too, but not as
Well, just going around that
much.
short, like stairwell there, it gets pretty dizzy after a while.
Well, yeah, going down, though, you get more dizzy because you're going faster. But when you're going up, because you're using more energy, and as a result, you're going more slowly, you don't get quite as dizzy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just even going down 3 or 4 stories, you get dizzy sometimes
Oh yeah,
if you're going
definitely.
because I like to skip steps if I'm going down sometimes. But I'm more fit now than I have been the last couple of years. So
Yeah, I need to get into that too. I've actually been looking at some like gym memberships here
use a
recently.
stair stepper because you're gonna need it. That's what's gonna
Yeah,
keep you prime for
if
the stairs.
if one of the gyms I decided to go with has a like one of those step type of machines or something like that.
Yeah. I'm sure a lot of people are tired of us talking about stairs at a hotel. So we'll just end here. Thank you so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed it. Again, April 27th is when we have another commentary. That is Thailand's Garuda. I forget what year it was made.
I think it was in the mid 2000s, somewhere around
Yeah,
there, early to mid 2000s.
I forget exactly. But yeah, it's a hoot.
Quite the hoot.
Quite the hootenanny. Uh, so we're gonna have fun with that. So come join us, even if you don't have the movie. It's gonna be fun. So thank you so much for listening. Please rate, review, and subscribe to us. And we'll see you here in a couple of weeks.
Yes. So just subscribe to us on iTunes, Google Play Music, and as well as the hit the subscribe button down below and hit that notification bell to get the latest updates from our YouTube channel. So yeah, be on the lookout for April 27th as we commentate Garuda. See you around, folks.